What is up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today I have my April wrap up for you, and then we're doing a little book haul at the end, so stay tuned for that. Apparently Guillermo wants to help me. In April, I read a total of 6 books. 2 of them I listened to on audio, so I don't have them here with me. Several really good reads this month, like kind of blew my mind a little bit, and I know I'm gonna be thinking about them for a really long time. So I was a little bit late with this one. I wanted to start it on like the first official day of spring, and I ended up not starting it until April, obviously. But that is The Way Spring Arrives. This is a collection of Chinese translated science fiction and fantasy from female and non-binary authors. I originally saw this in a local bookshop. I think it was like summer, and so I was like, I'm gonna keep that one in mind, but I'm not gonna read it until actual spring. It is such an interesting range of stories. Like the first one is called The Stars We Raised. It follows a group of young children growing up in a kind of an isolated village. They raise stars as if they were pets or something, and they're kind of talked about as if they are like imaginary friends that they eventually grow out of. As the kids get a little bit older, they're supposed to kind of stop raising the stars or sort of leave the stars behind. Particularly one of our characters kind of remains with his star, and he's sort of isolated and seen as a little bit odd. There was a little bit in here that reminded me of the Epic of Gilgamesh. I forget which one that was. Oh yeah, that was the title story. So the story that is called The Way Spring Arrives reminded me of that. There are also some essays in here. I think I actually found the essays to be more compelling than some of the actual fiction. They were just so good. So there's one in here that particularly talks about the net novel. So like the rise of writing online and how that really kind of paved the way for young female writers who a traditional publisher might not have accepted in the 90s. She could put her stuff up online and be more successful that way. Just looking at my notes, that story was called Net Novels and the She Era, How Internet Novels Opened the Door for Female Readers and Writers in China. One of the quotes from that one that I really liked was, "The ultimate agency is that of authorship, women writing themselves for other women to read, and almost as a byproduct, presenting a real three-dimensional female thinking to a male readership, who could otherwise only see them presented as damsels in distress or seductive temptresses." Overall, the stories were pretty entertaining, and I think it gave a little bit of an insight into like Chinese mythology and lore. I did feel like there were a few of the stories that it felt like the authors were more telling me what was going on rather than showing me, which is an easy trap to fall into. I've done that many times before with my own stories. I feel like with a short story, you are kind of obviously limited by word count, so that was probably a contributing factor in why some of them kind of felt like they were really summed up kind of too quickly. Some of them felt like I was almost just reading a Cliff Notes version of a story instead of like an actual story. But yes, overall really liked this one. All right, next up was one that I was not super impressed by. I've had this one on my TBR for a couple of years now. I don't know how many times I've scrolled past it on my like to be read board on Pinterest and thought, oh, that one looks good, I should get to that one soon. It just fell flat for me a little bit. It is Get in Trouble by Kelly Link. The blurbs really hype it up and make it sound like it's just this incredible collection of short stories. There are 9 in here, and I really liked 2 of them. So not the best ratio. We started off strong. The first story is called The Summer People. I absolutely loved that one. It feels nostalgic. It reminded me of being a little kid and being like in a new place, or like going outside and like exploring in the woods or stumbling upon something new, because there's a very mysterious house with some very interesting, I think, invisible inhabitants. It was kind of like not totally clear, but I also really liked that aspect of it. So you have this really spunky young female main character. She reminded me a little bit of like Scout from To Kill a Mockingbird, like that like very spunky young female spirit. And it really quickly turns into something that's kind of a little bit dark. She is free as she seems, because she seems unparented and almost neglected. Definitely open to interpretation at the end. Some of the stories just felt a little bit aimless, a little bit like, what is the point here? Like, what are we trying to say? And then another story would be the totally opposite, and it would be so in your face, like what the moral is. When you have things spelled out for you, it just kind of ruins the fun a little bit. The writing itself is good, but I just felt like the narratives themselves, the characters themselves, except for Fran in The Summer People, was just not quite compelling enough. So I think I gave this one like 2.5 stars. Then we had The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. This one was an audiobook that I listened to. It's been, again, on my TBR for a really long time, and I noticed it was in the Libby app for free, so I was like, why not? I really liked Play It As It Lays. This was the first Didion I read. Picked it up randomly at a Barnes & Noble one day. Love her writing, so I was like, might as well try her again and see if I still like her. So Play It As It Lays is fiction, but I thought I might as well try her nonfiction and see if I like that as well, because I do really love her writing. She's phenomenal. I believe she kind of started out as a journalist. I know she's written for like National Geographic and like Vogue. I did really like her nonfiction as much as her fiction. Actually, I think more, because in The Year of Magical Thinking, the main thing that she's talking about is losing her husband, and then her adopted daughter is in the ICU with some sort of like brain aneurysm injury. She very, very quickly experiences an intense amount of grief. The entire narrative is just her reflecting and looking back on how she reacted, why she reacted that way. It's very odd too, kind of the way that she was treated, like in the hospital, whenever I think she had like a caseworker come in to help her deal with her husband, who is also a writer, with her husband's passing. The caseworker called her a cool customer because of how well she was handling the grief, and like looking back, she realizes she was just stunned, like, you know, she was just in shock. It's not that she was like handling it so well. So it takes you through several years of like afterwards, what happened. It's very much like a play-by-play of how her life changed. So I would say it's probably going to be a little bit triggering if you've recently lost someone. You're not going to want to read this. She's one of those people who can put things in words that you may have only previously had feelings for and emotions for, but never really truly been able to verbalize. She's so good at that. She's so brilliant. And it's like when somebody is that intimate and that vulnerable, it's like the writing is just good because it's just so honest. So it's very intense, quite sad, but very good. I gave that one 5 stars. After that, I immediately jumped into Blue Nights because when I returned the audiobook of The Year of Magical Thinking, it must have given me Blue Nights as like a suggestion, and it's almost the same thing. I gave that one a pretty low score. I just don't think I should have followed it up immediately after reading The Year of Magical Thinking because, like I said, they're so similar. So it felt, Blue Nights kind of felt like a rehash, kind of like a watered down, truncated version. If you can only read one, definitely read The Year of Magical Thinking. It's more intense, it's more detailed. So it kind of just felt like I was getting the same information a second time. The only thing that's a little bit different is she really talks about aging. There is such an intense pressure, particularly on women, to look good and stay young no matter how old you are, and this shame around aging. So I really did like that aspect of it. The next book is so incredibly dense, and it was so controversial, and people still describe it as kind of a work in progress because there is a lot to chew on, there's a lot to unpack in here, and that is The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross by John M. Allegro. So this is basically a linguist's take on the potential misinterpretations of the biblical stories, and all the variations on the different word plays and things that could have been misinterpreted. So this little symbol right here has been seen in different parts of the world. It's the Amanita muscaria mushroom. Basically, John Allegro studied Sumerian, which is one of the first written records of language that we have and all the different roots of that language, and basically came up with all of these different variations of words that we think we know and we've translated, and how those interpretations carried into later religions, particularly Judaism and Christianity. So the first known religions that we are aware of are fertility cults. This quote that I wrote down kind of sums up a lot of ideas that I've been having and questions that have kind of been burning in the back of my brain for years. He says, one of the problems facing the student of Old Testament Hebrew is the probability that the classical tongue of the Bible does not accurately represent the spoken language of the ancient Israelites. In the Bible, considerable doubt can arise over the precise meaning of a passage, because the text was only consonantly written and the context insufficiently clear to offer grounds for certain interpretation. So a lot of his own interpretations are definitely up for debate. That's why it's sort of considered a work in progress. Again, it is very, very dense. In fact, only roughly half of this is the actual, like his actual book. The back half is all of the notes and the indices. This is another really good quote that kind of summarizes the book. To the mystic, the little red-topped fungus, the Amanita muscaria, must have seemed human in form and yet divine in its power to change men and give them an insight into the mysteries of the universe. He's referring to like the hallucinogenic properties of the mushroom. It was in the world, but not of it. In the New Testament myth, the writers tried to express this idea of the duality of nature by portraying as its central character a man who appeared human enough on the surface, but through whom there shone a godlike quality which manifested itself in miracle working and a uniquely authoritative attitude to the law. The extent to which they succeeded can be seen today in the mingled sympathy and awe with which Jesus is regarded in the Western world. So I can see why this was controversial at the time. The ideas that he puts forth are completely diametric to the thoughts and feelings of like modern day Christians and Jews, I'm sure. Basically what he is saying is that the biblical stories are not about real people who ever lived. It's basically wordplay that the ancient scholars were using to describe different aspects of this mushroom. And this book is essentially his attempt to decode those myths and interpret them as what he believes they really were. All of that being said, I gave it 5 stars just because it is so thought-provoking. Even if you don't believe anything that he actually says, it is just very interesting to think about. So I did really enjoy this one. And then the final book that I read this month, boyfriend and I actually read together because we were both very interested in this topic. We actually saw the author originally on a podcast. He was telling me about her story and that she had a memoir out, and I was like, well, we need to read it. And the book is In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park. She is one of only like 209 North Korean defectors to make it all the way to the United States. Her story, I think I said on Instagram in my little review, is equally horrific and harrowing. It's kind of insane to think about what she's lived through. It seems like humanly impossible. So she was born in North Korea, which if you know anything about North Korea, you know it's probably one of the least pleasant places to live. You basically just get brainwashed all day long. There's no internet, so you have no contact with the outside world. They even removed the word love from their language. They essentially are taught to believe that the Kim family, the Kim dynasty, that those men are gods on earth and to worship them and to not question anything. You can be thrown into a prison camp for just about anything. She was born in the early 90s when the famine, all the floods and the famine was happening. The floods basically wiped out all of the crops, and so people had very, very little to eat. The regime was not prepared to feed the millions of people. I think like 21 million was the population at the time. There's even a point in time where her mom and dad are not around, and so she and her older sister, she's a sister who's 2 years older than her, were left basically to their own devices with very little food to share, just like a little bit of rice, and it quickly ran out, and so they ended up in the woods like eating insects. That's how she survived. So just that alone is insane. But then hearing her actual story of escape and how she crossed the Yalu River, she was sold into human trafficking. She ended up crossing the Gobi Desert into Mongolia because Mongolia welcomes North Korean defectors and takes care of them. It's really insane. You kind of have to buckle up and be prepared for a pretty grim tale because it's insanely inspiring and almost just unbelievable. She's said before that she's not taken any like anxiety medication. She just deals with it, and she doesn't even think of herself as a victim. She considers it a blessing that she was born in North Korea because it gives her a special kind of gratitude. She said that being born anywhere else, you just don't have the level and depth of gratitude that she now has just for life, for the most basic things in life, like electricity and running water and food. We're actually reading, we just started her second novel, While Time Remains, because this was so good we like ran to the bookstore and bought her second book. So cannot recommend this one enough. All right, now let's get into the book haul. So a lot of these books are for, I think most of them are for a video that I want to do that's very similar to my Chuck Palahniuk video, which I'll link for you guys in the cards, where I read an entire author's work and then do a video kind of breaking down what I really liked, which ones maybe you can pass on. And so I just opened one, but I've got 5 here that I want to open. I've been waiting anxiously for them because that author is from the same tribe that I'm from. She is also Muskogee Creek, and she has been the Poet Laureate for the US for like a couple of years, like in a row, and I don't know that that accolade has been given to any other author, but that writer is Joy Harjo. I have actually had the pleasure of meeting her. It was very, very brief. It was when I worked at the bookstore. She came in one day, because she's from Oklahoma. She came in one day. I don't remember what it was that she bought, but that was really cool. I was way too starstruck and I did not intimate at all that I recognized her, which maybe was like kind of rude, and it's just one of those things where it happens so fast and it's so unexpected that you're like, you don't even know what you would possibly say. So anyway, I'll put on the screen all the ones that I've read by her. I kind of tried to, I think I initially wanted to start to go in publication order. I think I have messed that up since then. But yes, these are all the ones that I've read. And then I have several more, these included, that I want to read before I can do that video. So this one is Catching the Light, and it is basically a meditation on why she writes poetry. I don't think there are any actual poems in here. It's more of just like the art of writing and like her commentary on it. So another one, this tiny little baby, is Secrets from the Center of the World. And this has photographs in it from Stephen Strom, who she like writes a poem based off the landscapes. Maybe they just kind of go with it. So honestly, this one I could probably kind of flip through in a sitting. I feel like this would be really cool as like a coffee table book. Like they could have made this like giant, you know? That would have been really cool. Anyway, there's that one. Oh, this one was the only one I think I ordered that is not by Joy Harjo. This is Braiding Sweetgrass. Sunbeam's Jess here on YouTube just talked about this. She was actually really hyping up the audiobook, so I have that saved or on hold. I think I'm still at like a 5-week wait on it, but I really want to read this. It's like indigenous wisdom, all about plant life, so it's like nature. It shows how the approach of science, the objective approach of science, can be enriched by the ancient knowledge of indigenous people. So I'm gonna read it along with the audiobook. So there's this one. And then another Joy Harjo. These are all from eBay, by the way. This is the first one that I've gotten that's a little banged up, but no big deal. This is Conflict Resolutions for Holy Beings. I love the title. I love the cover on this one. Now this is a poetry collection. Let's see. A musical, magical, resilient volume from one of our most celebrated and essential Native American voices. It'd be a really good beach read because you can kind of, they're quick obviously to get through. You don't feel like you have to sit down for like an hour to get through something. So that'll be good for the summer. This last one is her second memoir. So I loved Crazy Brave. I was obsessed with it. It's so good. I highly recommend listening to the audiobook because she narrates it. And there's something so, her voice is very husky, and there's just something about hearing her read her own story that's really powerful. So I do recommend Crazy Brave. I hope that I like Poet Warrior just as much. I'm not sure how it's gonna be different than the first one. Okay, here it says she's a 3-term Poet Laureate. So I knew she had been the Poet Laureate for more than just 1 year. She offers a vivid, lyrical, and inspiring call for love and justice in this gorgeous, compassionate memoir from one of America's greatest living writers. It says, this is a musical, kaleidoscopic follow-up to Crazy Brave. It reveals how Harjo came to write poetry of compassion and healing, poetry with the power to unearth the truth and demand justice. There's just something in her prose, which is obviously what this is, because it's not, I mean, there may be some poems mixed in, but it's obviously like a memoir. There's something in her prose and in her poetry that is, sometimes it feels difficult to interpret and get to because there is something in it that's so pure that we've lost in our modern society. I don't know, there's something here that I want to try to kind of dive a little bit deeper into and really immerse myself in this summer. So I'm definitely excited for this one. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you read in April. What should I put on my May TBR? So you guys let me know what you've been loving. Put that in the comments, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.